Pirate kings, pirate queens, non-binary monarchs of the sea, hello, how we doing? Welcome to the right side of the pie chart. It's time for number 2 in our countdown to OP07. For those who have been following the countdown, thank you so much. It's been a great time going over these decks. But if you are new to the channel, here is a little bit about my process for these videos. I have gone through OnePieceTopDecks.com, SecondStorage.com, and Firefist.gg to log every single deck list that either won or topped a tournament in the Asian version of the Set 7 format, put them all into a giant spreadsheet, and assigned each list a point value based on the scale of competition of that tournament, the deck's placing in the tournament, and how far into the format that tournament took place. With that, I've been able to rank each leader as well as come up with a standard topping deck list for that leader, along with some very useful metrics on cost curve, amount of counter, number of 2K counters, non-counter characters, blockers, events, cards with a certain type even, as well as some tech choices and general popularity of cards that got used with each leader. I've also been reading a fair amount of Japanese articles from Note.com and doing some of my own testing to get further insight into these decks and why players made the choices they did, all for the purpose of getting us as ready as we can be for this set once it comes out over here. So thank you again for coming along, welcome to Sakura Kingdom, and let's get into the countdown to OP07. Number 2 is another new leader from OP07, a leader I've been very glad to see doing well, just because, this is one of the villains that I caught up the story with, I just gotta give him props. This is the new control deck on the block. If you miss Sakazuki, there's a good chance you're gonna like playing LUCCI. LUCCI is a 5-life black leader, and when attacking, you can discard the top 2 cards of your deck to give one of your opponent's characters -1 to their cost. The past 6 months have shown us that -1 cost on attack opens the door for control strategies. LUCCI doesn't have the same filtering capabilities that Sakazuki has, but, that's probably for the best. We can just leave that in the past. The only thing that can potentially hurt about milling cards as opposed to discarding them from hand is that sometimes we'll drop a Moria that we can't retrieve, but our strongest effects demand that we fill the trash up. So outside of some rare, very unlucky scenarios, this mill is a boon, and this enables our deck to work. Plus, the fact that this is on attack does let us play some mind games with our opponent now and then. If you just start the turn off swinging for 5 and reducing something, there's a chance your opponent might let it through because they thought you had the KO. But getting into the list, this is one of the few black decks that only plays 3 copies of Suru. She is a very efficient reduction card, but we also want to make sure that we have enough room for our Cypher Pole characters, of which we have abundant 2Ks. If you know me, and you've listened to my thoughts and reactions to Water 7 and East Lobby, you know that I hate Spandam so much. But he grabs our pieces while he gets us closer to the magic number of 10 cards in our trash, so I'm gonna give him a pass this time. I'm not forgiving him, but I'll let him work for me. Okay, I'm good. So with all this trashing that our leader ability does, Helmeppo can easily find his way there, and he contributes to the now classic Moria Helmeppo LUCCI combo in our late game. Now, with the trash being the prerequisite for some of our reduction, removal, or resurrection cards, when it comes to the early game, we like to prioritize removal that won't deplete that trash. So 2 copies of Brook from EB01 smooth those turns out. If we swing our lead, then playing from hand, he lets us KO a 2 cost on play, and if we have our stage out, that brings us up to 4. And while we aren't bringing cards back from the trash as much as, say, Moria, Spandine gives us some recursion specifically for Cypher Pole. By sending 3 of our Cypher Pole cards from the trash to the bottom of the deck, we can then resurrect a 4-cost or less Cypher Pole character, oftentimes LUCCI, to get more multi-character removal off. If we do this, then we'll still have to send another 3 for the LUCCI effect, so this does cost a fair amount of resources. But since we can play him off of Rebecca, this lets us get a double KO and a blocker for 4 dome. So as long as this combo comes at a time when we already have a healthy trash, or can easily fill it back up, that trash cost is very much offset, and we still have plenty of room to combo with our reduction if this happens in the late game. And speaking of the late game, we can make this happen with Moria as well. He could also grab our 4-cost Kaku or Khalifa to filter and or reduce in some select circumstances. In addition to that Spandine combo, Rebecca also lets us resurrect Brook for extra KOs, and retrieves our 2Ks, our blockers, our removers, standard princess things. Red Purple Law's leader effect does out her very easily, as does Luffy with their new 5-cost, so if you want to switch some copies of her out for Borsellino, that's not unheard of at all, especially if you want an edge in the mirror. As for Khalifa, she is a 2K, a 2-cost reducer, and lets us draw 2 and trash 2 to give us consistency and fuel our trash. If we don't need to get a LUCCI KO or set up a blocker on 4, she is a very valid play, but getting her in the trash to fuel our Spandine, our LUCCI, and our Kaku is also a priority. Then the new Kaku from OP07 is our other Cypher Pole 2K, and he lets us reduce a character's cost by 3. He's probably the least used of our reducers since he costs 4 to play from hand, and then requires us to send 2 more Cypher Pole cards to the bottom of our deck. He's usually best used as cost from the trash after we've countered with him, like Khalifa. And among black decks, LUCCI's strength is its ability to KO multiple characters at once with the 4-cost LUCCI. If we counter out of our opponent's first swing and then use our leader ability on 4 or 5, we can use this effect immediately. And just like in Sakazuki, he puts in an incredible amount of work off of Moria. We have a couple mid-cost KO characters we can use the mid-game, and the ideal choice is really going to depend on whether we want to save counter in hand or cards in our trash. And the second of those options is the set 3 Kaku, who can KO a 3-cost on play, 4 with lead, 6 with lead and stage, and he costs less trash-wise, but since he has counter, we sometimes want to use LUCCI given the option, even if there's only one character we need to KO. All of it's going to depend on what your priority is at that given moment. Now, over the course of this week, I have already sung Sabo's praises on 3 separate occasions. All I'll say is that, once again, he gives us trash synergy and helps us a lot in Black Mirrors, but he has just as much utility as an attacker to pressure our opponent and make them think twice about investing into a huge body if we're just a teeny bit short in our removal. As always, Moria is great on 8, but if we play him on 9 or 10 with one of our events, the ceiling just goes higher. The basic LUCCI Helmeppo combo can KO 2 characters whose costs add up to 6, our leader ability brings that to 7, the Ennie's Lobby stage brings it to 9, then if we add a Tempest leg, we are KOing a sum of 12, if we use Ice Age instead, that goes up to 14, and then if we use both of those events, a Tempest leg and Ice Age, we'll KO 17 total. Not a ton of turns like that, but for the sake of theory, that's the ceiling of our Moria LUCCI combo. But that being said, Moria is not the end-all be-all of our late-game plays. We have a couple different high-end options if we either don't see the Moria, or we think there's a better turn to use him on. As a quick disclaimer, this data list is a bit teched out with multiple one-ofs from the algorithm. People had a bunch of different combinations for how they ran this suite, and there's lots of room to switch these around given your own priorities and your own metagame, and even how you enjoy playing this deck personally. If you get to 8 or 9 and your opponent's characters have KO resistance, or if they have enough cards in hand and you can benefit from more reduction next turn, Isho can provide a nice path into the end of your curve. And if he stays on the board, then those KOs just get more and more feasible. But as far as that hand reduction goes, if our opponent has more than 7 in hand at the start of the turn, we can start with a 5k leader swing to make them potentially send a counter, and then still get 2 potentially more important cards out of their hand with that Isho effect. In fact, it might even be worth foregoing the KO strategy for this one turn, even if our opponent doesn't have resistance, since it's very likely we'll be getting multiple KOs the next turn, and we'll be able to catch up. And to that end, the 8-cost Sabo is our other option for multiple character KOs, with his wide range of 5 and 3. With the leader effect, we can take out a 5 and 4, 5-cost Cade, one of Law's 4 costs. With our leader ability and a reduction event, he's hitting any 2 of Law's characters, or an opposing Moria and the resulting 4 cost versus black, as well as multiple other configurations. We can max out at 9 and 10 if we have the stage in our events. The math is mathing with this guy. But if you do not want to do math, and you just want to destroy something tall, Stussy can just KO anything for 9 Dawn. Only cost is that we have to get rid of one of our characters from the board. In a perfect world, we could search her out with Spandom at the start of the turn, and then just send him for the effect, because, get that guy out of here. But, sometimes you won't have a choice that easy. So her value can be very subjective depending on one's own play preferences and the given game state. As with our single copy of Isho, one Stussy could be unreliable, but having this wide assortment of 9k bodies can give us versatility in our responses and a consistent way to hit our Black Yellow Luffy matchup. It's just a very good thing, once again, that we don't have that same filter as Sokka. Then we'd be just getting into some unfun territory. But if you want to talk fun, let's talk a more conditional but more efficient version of Great Eruption. Tempest Leg is nuts. As long as we have 10 in our trash, meaning that we have to consider every Cypher Pull effect we use very carefully, we draw one and give something -3. The applications, as mentioned before, are incredible. Even if you hit 10 in your trash early on, hold on to these as long as you can. Chances are they'll come in handiest after you're both at 10 Dawn and your opponent finally plays their biggest threats. Same goes for Ice Age. As soon as you see the leader across from you, figure out what you want to save these for. Against Bonnie, be Zoro and Kid, for example. Only exception to that is Law. In that matchup, there does stand a decent chance that we don't even get to 10 in our trash by the end of the game, so the draw on its own might be a little more useful against him. Finally, we have Eni's Lobby, an amazing stage that finally has the leader to match. A -2 every turn shores our math right up. It's not the only way to get through the game, so we don't need to play 4, especially since there are some turns in our curve where playing this is very inopportune. But if we see it turn 1 going second, turn 2 going first, or even turn 4 going first, we love slapping this down. Or we just get lucky off these 5 life and hit it off our trigger. This guy's a beast. If you like combo, he's got your combos. But getting into our card count stats, this entire top row and those 2 Kakus are both played in every single build. Suru in 97%, Stage goes down to 84%, and then Stussy, 2-cost Brook, Helmet Bow, Sabo are a bit more subjective, but still in the majority. We see Ice Age just under 50, with more people running 2 copies than 1. 2 copies sounds great to me. This list just gets very, very tight, and the algorithm only had room for the 1. But in my testing, I had actually played a fair amount of games with an earlier version of the algorithm list, and the 6-cost Brook really came in handy for me. That 5-cost Sabo is popular. Borsellino is still a relevant card, and there will be times when we need removal on those turns. Plus, regardless of the KO versus put in trash distinction, he has the highest base reach of our mid-cost removal characters, so he can hit some highs that Kaku might not be able to on a given turn. Isho and Borsellino did both make it into this list, 1 copy being rare for both of them, so keep that in mind as you tweak your own ratios as you test this deck out. I also find Nightmare Luffy to be a very interesting inclusion in the same vein as Brook. He only trashes a 2-cost before our other reduction, but he trashes instead of KOs. Plus his ability to send 4-cost characters to the bottom of deck from our trash and then power himself up for every 3 can give us that extra swing we need against Black Yellow Luffy. It's all just a question of timing and how long he stays on the board. EBO1 also gave Black its own variant of Jet Pistol with Finger Gun. Milling 2 is so very in line with our game plan, and 5-cost is the big number in this format. The only question is whether or not generating a character is worth that trade-off. If you decide you want to be as consistent and voluminous as possible with those non-counter cards, 6 King Gun is going to come in very handy to give you the defense you need. And Yusuf is a very cheap KO option if you're good with the resource management of this deck and have the reduction to spare. Then the rest of these were only played in 1 list each. Hina and Kuzan are both such generically good black staples. Just gotta find the room for them in a deck like this. Honestly, if I see someone counter with Hattori, I'm just... They win, spiritually. I love seeing the little pigeon man. That's great. thematic play is always welcome, but he is still a Cypher Pool card. He is still fuel for those effects. Honestly, if I just hear that someone wins a tournament because of the extra power Hattori gave their Lucci, highlight of the format for me. I would love that. Please, someone make that happen. And then I see this nifty single copy of Hogback to get a Moria from the trash that we mill or gets KO'd. I don't know how often it's gonna happen, but I see you. I see you. It's nifty. That's a neat pick. As I have alluded to, this list in particular has lots of room for edits. The one-ofs, Isho, Borsellino, Ice Age, Stussy, they're all fair game. You can reduce or even take out the Sabo. Cut down on the Suru because we have other 2K options. Maybe for a Hattori, even though he's not on this slide. I'm just kidding. Or even playing one Helm Eppo. Very, very valid. Personally, I'm itching to get back to one of the 6-cost Brook. You can also max out your Becky's, or add a second Borsellino if that KO immunity is important to you. 4th Kaku if we really want to round out those Cypher Pull cards. And then we can increase our Isho, 5-cost Sabo, max out the stage, add a second Stussy, second Brook, and the other Kaku as well. Between you and me, Kaku getting a happy ending is one of my number one agendas for the series, so if I gotta play 4 of each version of him, then that's a sacrifice that I am willing to make. But that's LUCCI. Man, oh man, this is a fun deck. Depending on whether we share the same philosophy, control and fun may or may not be synonymous to you, but there's so many lines of play with this deck. There is so much chefitude with how you build your list. I've learned something every game I played with LUCCI. There is so much to explore here. And if you just like Water 7, Ennie's Lobby, the Cypher Pool characters, then here you go. You can finally play them in a great deck. As always, if you have enjoyed this profile, feel free to let me know or leave a like. If you want to get notified when I put the rest of these videos out later today, I hope, happy release day, by the way, then I'm always grateful for another subscriber. Thank you so much to everyone who has been watching these so far. I actually just hit one of my big goals as far as watch hours go, so that is keeping me going as I get the rest of these videos out. I am so excited to finish the countdown. But this is Sakura Kingdom. I'm just gonna hop straight into recording number 1. Honestly, today is just content. I will see you very soon.